As we've been telling you from the start, this is a series which has grown out of a decision by a group of persons associated with the Living Water community in promoting the idea of nonviolence. It began last year with 40 hours of prayer and then 40 days of activism, followed by a peace march, and has been enlarged into this 8-part series of discussions on the theme. In tonight's discussion, we look at what we call coping with the impacts and effects of violence on our lives, breaking the cycle, parenting and children. Our guests this evening, Dr. Margaret Naked Chatur, a clinical and educational psychologist who's the current president of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, and Ms. Anne John of the non-government organization Families in Action. She's the holder of a master's degree in clinical psychology with an emphasis on mental disorders and illnesses and psychological assessments. As usual, we invite you to, in the listening audience, the viewing audience, to call and join the discussion when we open the phone line. As well, you can join us via Facebook. Our live Facebook page is running as we speak. So let's get started. Let me ask you, Dr. Naked Chatur, to open the bowling, as it were. Put this discussion in perspective for us this evening. Thanks for joining this discussion.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I would like to start off by sort of phrasing parenting and children under 3 aspects. The first is why and how are we parenting? Secondly, what are the early developmental experiences of children that impact their brain development? And thirdly, possibly what are the varying parenting styles that we're doing? So the first one, why and how we're parenting, Andy. A lot of people take it for granted that parenting only involves our biological children, but we have adoptive parents, step parents, and again, we parent based on our ability and our early experiences. So we may have personal factors, our morals and values. I think the culture of our society influences to a very large extent how people parent. Then we have possibly some legal aspects. There are parents out there who parent from a distance, all right, whether they're separated or divorced. Some of them may not have access or through supervision, etc. So I want to look at why do we parent, and is it something of our own volition or something that we're forced to? Now, parenting, if we kind of look at that terminology, parenting really, I think, is to help children learn what behaviors are appropriate under different circumstances and to guide them to make proper decisions, safe choices, and also, I think, long-term to develop self-control as they are faced with challenges in their early lives. And so we have seen, and I know this discussion is framed within the concept of violence. So we have seen the impact of abusive forms of discipline, I think, of children in our society. And as a psychologist, we see a lot of high levels of stress and anxiety, especially with children, poor academic performances, engaging in substance abuse and deviance, etc. And I want to look at that again at you talking about the cycle of abuse. Now, there's an intergenerational transmission of violence when children are exposed to certain circumstances, and early experiences of these kinds of negative influences will affect their interpersonal relationships later on, whether it is with a partner or with their own children. The second thing I want to look at quickly is the early experiences and the impact of this on the brain. Now, I think 0 to 2 is a critical period for children. That is when the brain is plastic, they're absorbing a lot of things, and people fail to realize that whatever they see, they imitate and they learn. So could you imagine all of these experiences, all of the violent behaviors that they witness from parents come into their brain? Now, 2 things are happening there with this plasticity. When children are under stress, cortisone is released, and it sort of hinders their thinking processes. It's a sort of fight or flight syndrome. But when they're happy and when they're calm, and when we can use this time to frame their thinking, there's something called oxytocin, tocin release, which is called the happy or the emotional nutrient that make them very relaxed and stressed and not stressed and able to think through their process. Now, within that also, we have to be very careful of parents and their language, because I think many parents talk at their children rather than talk to their children. And talking at their children is all the don'ts that our society is so accustomed to. Don't do that. Pick up your shoes. Where did you put that? Did you do your homework? Rather than talking to them, which is framing your language in a particular way. Why are you looking so quiet? What's happening to you today? What was your experience in school? And I see you smiling, so I know a question coming there. All right, and the third thing I want to briefly look at is what are parenting styles? And according to the research, there are 4 styles that stand out. Authoritarian style, which tends to be very aggressive, very demanding obedience in children, so that they tend to be very fearful of their home environment. And one of the things I've always stressed with parents is that if a child is not allowed to react in their home and to talk about situations, they will do that in the school environment. And that is why we have so many examples of bullying in the school, because the children know that they can't, in that authoritarian environment, be reactive because they will get punished and spanked or verbally abused. So they do it in the school. Then the second type is a style that is uninvolved, very laid back, not demanding. Parents tend here to be overly permissive, neglectful of their children's needs. And in this kind of uninvolved style, a lot of parents focus on their own needs, their jobs, what they're doing, to the fact that a lot of children here, again, are neglected, they're uninvolved, and they look at that. They look at that style. A third one is a permissive kind of laissez-faire style, which incorporates both very strict, and it's confusing for children, because in this style of parenting, parents go highs and lows. One minute they're consistent and demanding, the other minute they're very permissive and not involved. A fourth type of parenting, which we want to talk about, and I hope that people can respond to this, is what is known as the authoritative style of parenting. And this parenting style allows the child freedom, but within limits, within boundaries, allows the child to be in an environment that is structured and welcoming. And children here, I think, become very self-confident. They're socially competent, and they tend to have a lot of social skills. So in a nutshell, parenting is not easy. It's not an easy thing at all. And parents sometimes are very hard on themselves, and I hope we can look at that. But the important thing to get from all of this is look at the child that you have. It is as it is. Don't want to parent another child or the child that you don't have. And take care of yourself.
I like that point. Don't want to parent another child or a child that you don't have. We will come back to some of that,
yes,
keeping in mind the theme about how you break these cycles of violence, and how, because some of what you say there, probably the violence in people's lives starts there. Right? And John, your opening salvo.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things we have to be very mindful of is that children are social learners. More importantly, they're observational learners. So whatever they would be experiencing in the homes, that is exactly what they would take in and put it to self, put it to memory, and see how they can now utilize some of the behaviors that come from parents. And ever so often, they're also like sponges. So you find they would take in the behaviors they see from the parents, and in turn, as was mentioned by Dr. Sheff, actually go into the schools and attempt some of the behaviors, and if they see that it's working, they're going to continue so. When you go back to, let's say, the 0 to 2, or even further, the 2 to 5s, what we call the terrible twos, and that period of tantrums, if we, as parents, you don't get it, you don't get in control with it, children are very manipulative as they continue to grow and develop. And they can see, if I create a tantrum, I want something, and I can't get it, and I do this, I'm getting it. Because parents tend to either give in for peace sake, give in because they're outside in the public for not to be embarrassed. So they tend to give in to children, not recognizing what they're doing is enabling and enforcing a type of behavior in the child, where the child is seeing, I just have to be a bit more aggressive, and I'm going to be able to get my way. So utilizing that sort of behavior, you can see them in the schools actually enacting some of what they've learned over time. So we have to be very mindful, again, as a parent, how best to help our children become more self-disciplined, so that some of what it is they may have to, let's say, get, that a parent can help them to understand when the parent may say, no, you can't. And hear the word I'm saying. I'm not saying no. No, you can't. And give a reason why. You know, sometimes we can utilize that and be very negative to our children. Because between 0 to 2, especially the 1.5 to 3, that word no, they love it. Love it simply meaning when you tell me no, we understand yes. And when we in turn want to tell them do not do, they tell you no. And they love that. So they feel some sense of control is beginning. Children begin to become egocentric even from that point, knowing themselves, and they can continue to utilize it, as I said, to see and to find where, how, that they can get some, whatever they want. So it is something we have to be mindful, yes, in terms of stages of development and how to help them. When we reach a particular stage, which I believe is the pre-adolescent, and even further back, so between the 7 to 10, the 7 to 9, that is where you have to hold on to the children, tap into them, talk to them, have a lot of conversation with them. Allow them to respond to you, not just that the parent is actually always finding things negative, always scolding the child. We use the word discipline so loosely, but many times what we're doing is just punishing our children. So what happens is that we don't tell them beforehand, you know something, it may not be nice to go and play with the matches, with the candles, because you know this can happen to you. What they do is wait until the child takes the matches, lights the candle, and then beat. The punishment comes without you giving the child some preparation before. And that is where you talk to them. They ask the questions, why? From the time a child starts to learn to say words, and you say, that is not right to do. Why, Daddy? Why, Mommy? Wow, you feel you don't need to answer as a parent. But importantly, the more you can respond to your child when the child asks the question, why? Even though they may tell you 10 whys, you continue to. It helps the child to understand the dynamics of life, helps the child to understand there's a reason for the behaviors that we do. It's not that whatever we do, Mommy or Daddy just scold us, and that's it. So in other words, a lot of conversation has to take place between parent and child. It's very important. And not just wait until the child does something wrong that you have to scold them for it.
All right, so both of you have sort of presented pictures of parenting here that yeah. I hazard to say that some of those things, our parents didn't learn those things, they didn't know those things.
Yes.
And we feel that we keep saying that somehow child rearing 50 and more years ago was better than they were now. How is it that came about? If from what you're both saying is
yes,
that
yes.
it appears that people should learn to be parents before they have children.
I think there's a lot that's happening now in terms of exposure that children are having. You have to remember when we were, first of all, you had one television in terms of a station.
Some didn't have any.
So that's it. Some didn't have at all. Black and white, of course, right? Now there's so many channels that a child could tap into. Then I call them the techno gadgets. So the cell phones and the tablets, and there's a lot that the children are exposed to. Some of the movies, some of the shows they look at, they see the interaction of parent to child internationally. You see, one of the things we have to look at, we say, yes, long ago it was like this wasn't happening. But remember that when a parent long ago said, do as I say, full stop, that child just had to accept that Mom or Dad is telling me that's it. Now children want more than that, and they're seeing from other children and worldwide, the global, that they can ask questions. So, and then there's a lot they can go. Children are now, they learn a lot. They have the know-how to go into all the techno gadgets. They see things, they view things, they get to learn without having to approach their parents.
They come with equipment that our parents didn't come with.
They didn't have.
With it, so on. Say yeah. On that, Dr.
I think that, well, first of all, parents tend to parent as they have been parented. And one of the things long ago was that licks did it, all right? When you spanked a child, the child listened. But research has shown us that it works for a while. And as Anne is saying here, children now are exposed to so many different things. But I think what parents are doing now, Andy, that we didn't see before is that they are letting go of their parental authority. And they are fearful a lot of parents who come in to see me, you know, they are fearful that if they say anything harsh to their child, the child might want to commit suicide, or the child might want to do something, because out there is telling them a lot of things. Out there is telling them that you're not supposed to talk hard to your child. Out there is telling them that you're not supposed to spank it. You can now sue your parents. You can now go to the police if the parent. So, you know, parents' authority, I think, to a large extent is being undermined. But I think that's not the challenge. The challenge, I think, is that parents no longer trust even their own selves to do a good job, and giving up in the face of adversity. But that is one of the things that I think strengthens us, that adversity, and we have to teach our children, I think, emotional resilience. Because parents sometimes ask me, you know, you teach them all of these things, and we send our parents out into a world where people are teaching their children other things. But I said one thing stands up, and that is the R word, that's resilience. And that resilience will allow your child, when that child is exposed to circumstances, to say, no, my mother taught me differently. My father told me not to do that. So they can stand up. But you see, I think, again, parents give up too easily in the face of all of the challenges out there.
Yeah. But relate that, and John, to the question of bringing up children in such a way that either they don't inculcate violence,
right,
or they know how to reject it, resist it, and repel it.
Understand. I think one of the things we have to be very mindful of is peer pressure. From the time the child goes into school, they want to belong in a different way. The culture of the school is very challenging for the child and for the parent. So we also have to look at materialism has taken over. Parents, I mean, you always hear about one is home and one is at work. So the idea of a parent, mostly the mother at home, would do all the nurturing and helping that child. Now, because of the economic situation and the need to, plus single parenting is a huge issue now, so that you find it's very difficult for that issue of the child to be able to actually cope with what's happening. You also have to recognize that because parents are no longer, one is not at home anymore, and it's because they have no choice but to be out there working, the child almost, there's a sort of a role reversal. The child becomes the parent in many ways. An older child has to look after the younger one. The child has a key to open the door. The child has to actually travel, take public transport with the younger ones, come home, prepare meals, and do lots of things that usually a parent does. So it becomes even more difficult for the child to be able to be a child. And that in itself affects the way a child needs to develop and grow.
So is that a bad thing that both parents work outside of the
Well,
home?
not so much that, but the issue is that, yes, you may have a limited time with your children. However, I continue to believe that the ultimate responsibility for a child is the parent. And because of the parent utilizing the idea or the excuse, for want of a better term, I'm too busy, I'm so tired, and want to leave it up to the teachers and the church to actually bring up the children, that in itself is something we have to look at. So we have to look at the little moments that we're with the children. That quality of time with the children is very, very important to help that situation in the home life.
Okay, so what will make up for the absence of well, in this case, I mean, you're referring to the mothers who are now working more than they used to.
Yes,
and that could go into a different kind of direction.
Sure.
So you're talking about, you know, women's claim for self-actualization and self-fulfillment and all of that.
Accepted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doctor.
I see that possibly in a different light. No, we have two parents, and I mean, that's the reality. They have to go out there to work and so. And many times these parents go on a guilt trip because they feel sorry that they don't have the quality time for their children. They feel sorry that they're not there to help with homework and so. So they begin, Andy, I think, to overcompensate the child by providing material things, by being very permissive, by sending them to stay over at people's homes and so on. They get a bit careless because remember, the kinds of values that they would want to instill in their child may not be necessarily the same in others' homes. So again, the ball is back in the court of parents. To what extent do we kind of give leeway in situations where we overcompensate, because I know there are parents who do everything for their children. I mean, one of the things I tell parents when they come, because when there are problems with children, usually you would see children who are not doing chores, who are bored in their home, who have no responsibility. And I do believe that from early o'clock, as soon as the child begins to walk and talk, you must give them that responsibility so that they can feel that connection within the home, that I am in charge of this. I'm in charge of the dog. I am in charge of folding the clothes. I have that connection to family. And you ask the question, Andy, what do you do? As a mother myself, I think the importance of ritual is necessary. You have to establish rituals with the children in the home, whether it is prayer life, whether it is every Sunday the family comes together without cell phones at the dinner table,
yes.
whether it is, you have to, because children connect to rituals and they remember that as part of their experiences. And I do not think that, I think we have sort of that cell phone, that social media, we have given it up. You know, children look to that, because even at the dinner table, you see all of them up with a cell phone. You know, wherever they go, and I think parents are abdicating.
So how do we escape what the demands of the age are?
You must have rules, and that is where rules come in. That is where, you know, you have standards set. Because, let me tell you, and I know Anne talked about the 0 to 2, but I think that crucial, you see that pre-adolescent into adolescent years,
that is the major.
That infancy is one where the development of the child or the amygdala is zooming up, and pre-adolescence into adolescence, and between the ages of 12 to 16. It's very challenging, because you hear parents say, oh gosh, my child became so different when he went into secondary school. I don't know my child anymore. But it's not that. Your child is the same child, but now confronted with circumstances that are different from what you instilled. And many parents say, oh, phew, primary school is finished. They are good now. They're good to go, but they're not good to go. That is when you hold on tighter. That is when the child is rebellious. That is when your rules in your home begin to be stood up, and your child begins to say, I wonder if what mommy is saying is right. I wonder if I can go. And parents kind of shut down. I've had a mother says, I don't know what else to do. There's not my child anymore. And they let go. And I think that is where parents need to understand that pre-adolescence, between 12 and 16, those crucial years are the years where you go in and you hold on and you shape and you prune and you continue what you did.
How, with all of this, we try and raise children to avoid the effects of violence, even if, and responding to violence with violence, even when it happens to you?
Sure. Interestingly, we do a lot of parenting workshops, and one of our topics, believe it or not, is play. And that play. And what some of the suggestions are, because we look in terms of how play can affect the child. And the effects are fantastic, you know, the physical, the psychological, the mental, the social, the emotional. And one of the things is that, with that, yes, it's limited moments, but just think in terms of a family having a night or day of just play. And we're talking about board games. And it doesn't have to be every day, every week, might be just once a month. But it's about when everyone would come together. It's about putting away all your techno gadgets, and you're sitting around the table having some fun. And that tells you a lot. It creates bonding, it creates communication, it understands emotions, you know, and that helps to bring back something that is being lost.
Do you advise parents to do that?
Yeah, oh yes, I actually do it in workshops where I have the parents play. And
they come back and report that
they probably think in terms of planning a dance night, and you compare your days, how you dance with you have music in the background. So it's just creating an atmosphere that is more welcome in the home, and you find children are quicker able to want to communicate with mom and dad, because they're seeing a side of mom and dad, just not just the rigid rules and so on, but you're seeing another aspect of where we can laugh and play and talk. And so that, and when you talk about the adolescent phase, that 12 to 16, children shut down. They no longer want to talk to parents. And they come to us in sessions and say that, I don't like to talk to my mother. I don't like to talk to my father. They don't understand me. They don't know what it's all about. So you see, that loss of communication starts before.
Yeah. And how you will address that, Dr. Naki?
All right. So one of the things, especially with adolescents, let's look at that, because between 0 to 12, I think there's a lot of opportunity, Andy, for parents to really make a difference, because that's when children are learning, that's when they're rationalizing morality and all of that. After 12 is very difficult.
Yes.
And when you hear all of what the ministries and so talking about, let's put this into secondary schools, let's do this, you've lost a lot of the children there. A lot of those resources should have been in the primary school when teachers at first notice that something is happening to children, that children are becoming aggressive or bullying and so. Now,
so the chances of recovery, you just
the
use that
chances
term,
of recovery,
are
I
lessened
think,
by the
are
time.
lessened by the time they enter those, because most children have it figured out already how the family is, how mom and dad is, whether it's abusive or non-abusive, whether it is loving, what am I in here, how do my parents think of me, am I significant or not? So I think it lessens it. And as Anne said, what adolescents do? They begin to mask. So they put on that facade, that bravado, how are you? I good, cool, everything good. And under there is a lot of struggle with peers, with the reality of life, with violence, and how to deal with that. And there are many adolescents who don't talk to their parents because they feel their parents would think they're making too much a big thing about it. And they feel that their parents possibly can't even address that, or and they close in on themselves. There are many, I think more than before, young men coming into counseling who are very introverted and who are unable to relate to others. And a lot of males, Andy, I think young adolescent males are self-harming. That was a behavior that was usually, you would see it mostly in females, and imitative behavior, but a lot of young men are self-harming. There's suicidal ideation. So you're not only just looking at what's out there affecting, how is the male role being now eroded to the point where males feel as if they can no longer be aggressive or fight it out or talk it out or things like that. And I think there's too much pressure.
And self-harming is not necessarily, as some people say, a cry for attention.
It is.
It is.
And for response.
It is. It's self-harming is, I mean, that is when the adolescent or the young person, because we're seeing it even in primary school, says something is happening with me. I can't talk about it, but I want you to see that I'm bleeding. I want to see that there. I want you to see that. And they hide it from parents and teachers and so. But they do it in the privacy. And that is also an imitative behavior, because remember they're in groups who are talking about it and talking about parents, and some of them may have similar concerns, you know.
And what ought to be an appropriate parental response to that kind of behavior?
Well, in terms, most importantly, is to find out why your child would be self-harming.
The root cause,
You know, that is so important, because sometimes the parents just bring them to us, and we have to do whatever is necessary, not going into what may have started it in the first place. And this is something I think is that parents' level of understanding, parents' level of patience, that is being lost, the tolerance is lost. And so when the child starts, instead of trying to engage in some conversation with the child to find out what may be some underlying issues that may be affecting them, it's almost as though they've given up. So that is something, you know, that is happening quite a lot now. And it is something, not only that they hide it, by the way, they actually cut and allow the parents to see. Sometimes they actually put the cotton they would have soaked up the blood with right around whereby the parents could see. Something is happening to me. I am hurting. I'm in pain. You need to see it, and you need to come to me and talk to me, which isn't happening. So it continues.
Yeah. So, I mean, so given this kind of formidable environment in which parenting is happening and child rearing is happening, how do parents get a handle on then, you know, stopping it at some point, breaking the cycle such that we don't perpetuate?
You see, the thing with a lot of parents, especially where boys are concerned, Andy, they think there's a phase. They will go out of it. I got through it, you can get through it. But children, I think now, not like long ago, they're very observant. They see what's happening. A lot of the root causes of these behaviors stem from the home. They look at how dad treats mom. They look at that relationship. And especially boys, they internalize that and they observe it and they are affected by it. I had a young man come in And it's because of how he saw the father treating the mother. And he couldn't tell the mother about it because, you know, he felt that she would cry again. And he couldn't tell the father because the father said, boy, that's not your concern. And he began to cut. And I remember telling him, I'm going to get your parents in the same room with you, and I want you to tell them exactly how you're feeling. And of course, I had to ask his permission to do that. And when he started to say, this is how you make me feel, you could have seen the look on his parents' face and so on, especially when they were in an environment where they could listen, because I was there, I was moderating, so they had to listen to him. And when they began to respond, he smiled, because he knew they're hearing me now. I can tell my opinion, I can voice. And this masking that I talked about is because a lot of our young people feel voiceless. They can't voice concerns, so they become, in the school, very reactive. And people look at physical aggression as, you know, they're bad children, but there's always, as Anne said, a root cause for that behavior. And I think more and more parents need to really wake up to the fact that they have to revisit how they parent, their styles of parenting, and the effect of all of this on their children. Because you're looking at long-term. Children may not, and adolescents may not act out in the home, but when they enter relationships, that same father who told the mother, or told the child, I'm beating you, you know, because I love you. You know, that duality, that confusion, you know, and you need to listen, you know, and I'm hitching you now because I want you. And as they're beating them, they say, don't beat your brother, you know, the confusion they have, so that when they enter relationships, and when we see all of these cases of domestic violence where the guy tells you... So
this idea about sparing the rod and spoiling the child, that's archaic?
I believe in some context. I think that has
Within
been...
context,
yes,
yes.
that has been taken out. There's a misinterpretation in all of that, and people tend to use that as whether it's an excuse or not, you know. And so that is something one has to be very careful, because when we look at the rod and you look at the rod of correction, that goes any which way you all can think of. And there are other ways than taking a belt to a child if you want to try and help. The child does something and you're not satisfied with that and you punish. I keep stressing, there's a difference between discipline and punishment. Discipline, we need to help our children to recognize things. The little one, help them to know how to put away the toys when they finish playing with it. The children, as they get older, you have your books, you have your bed, you fix your, you know, you make up the bed, you wash the way, you know, you do little things. You help them to know what to do, how to do it, how you treat each other, siblings, what is right, what is wrong, and different things like that.
So going, you know, being abandoned or being banished to your room without TV, without anything.
That is when something is done, when they would have done, when you would have taught them to be self-disciplined, to understand how behaviors can be what we call positive and negative, and should they go against that as, you know, rules and regulation, yes, they need to be punished. You can't allow a child to get, then you become that permissive type of parenting. But you need to. So you utilize boundaries, limitations, whatever you need to. I think that is something needs to be done the belt, because many times it's not working.
So we should move that universality where licks is not on anymore.
I'm not saying no. I'm not saying not on, but we have to remember also that line between licks and abuse.
Yes. But there's some professionals who say that any kind of licks is violence once there is corporal punishment, as we call it.
I think in our society we do not see spanking or licks as a form of violence or connected to violence at all. It has been outlawed in our schools and in Trinidad. Yeah. Some teachers still use it, but within the confines of the home, parents feel that we could do what we want.
And they continue.
But really, I think spanking is associated with violence, and children begin to see it like that.
How do you respond to the parents who say that is the problem? That, you know, that because we've demonized licks? Because
you see, as I tell teachers, they do not explore alternative forms of discipline. That's all they know, shouting or licks, and, you know, that's immediate. And we have to act, because with actions there are also consequences. But many parents, I think, react, which is stepping back, which is regressing. They have to pro-act, and I always use this kind of visual form, because many parents need to pro-act, which is, okay, now tell me what's going on. But they act out of anger, out of frustration, immediately rather than stepping back, controlling their emotions. And as I said, as I started, this is imitated by children who learn to do the same thing with their friends, with their relationships, or later on, etc. Yeah.
As you talk, when I'm remembering, you know,
Yeah.
when I was small, and you know, my sisters or girls in the village and so on, this idea of, you know, they would go, you know, building a house and they would be playing the teacher and beating the posts and so on,
Yes.
instilling discipline on the posts.
Because that's what they see, you know.
That's all they see. I was about to say the same thing. When you see the little ones playing miss,
Yeah.
that's what they do, just like nothing else. But beyond that, there was another issue I'm looking at, and you know, you talked about it, that frustration. A parent comes home from work, you know, deadlines, boss at them, co-workers frustrating you. You're on the road. You either have to stand and wait on transport, or you have your own car and use traffic. You're hungry, tired. If it is when you reach home, you have to cook. Then your children you have homework to attend to and so on. And one of them just rushed and threw a glass down, broke it. Wow, you know what happens? Take up the bell, the stick, whatever it is, and you just go like this. And it has nothing to do with the child having broken the glass. It's that the parent is taking out every inch of
their own
that
frustration
and stress on the child. And that is one of the factors we have to look in terms of why do we beat.
And so these things create a kind of spiral that creates more violence in the
Of course,
society.
it's a cycle.
Yes.
It's a
yes,
cycle
it's
of
part
abuse, really, that you're thinking of here. And as Anne says, therefore, in parenting, we have to look at the two sides of the coin, and what is rational, what is emotive. The emotive part of the parent responds in anger and frustration immediately, literally.
Yes.
The rational steps back and says, what is causing that trigger? Maybe when I come home, I need possibly to go and lie down for 5 minutes and give the kids something to do, and then get back to the table. So that rational part looks at it, steps back, allows the child also to problem solve, because they would see mom saying, okay, we'll talk about that later. Whatever you did, I didn't like what you did to your brother, I didn't like what you did, but let's talk about that. And allows them also time to step back and to control, because I think one of the things that causes this cycle is the lack of self-control, self-regulation, the ability to control your emotions and to know when to do it. Yeah.
All right, there's a call on the line. Good evening. Welcome to the program.
Hello, good evening,
Good evening.
Andy, and good evening to the two panelists there.
Yes.
This is a great program. One of the things I like to see is that the ladies there spoke a lot,
Which one?
the standards and all this, but I believe that young people are also, while we may have our standards within the home, we allow a lot of information, uncensored information, into our living rooms, and all in the name of freedom. And you know, everyone has the right to broadcast. Everyone has the right to just broadcast what they think we should listen to, and do not have proper standards within the media to really censor certain things. When we speak of censorship, there's a whole school of people that would say, hey, you know, people should have freedom, children should have freedom. But who is to determine what is right and what is wrong, right? What is moral and what is not?
All right, so what are you advocating? So what are you advocating in light of that?
Well, what I'm saying is that this information that these two intelligent women have, and the organizations that we have in the country, like National Parents and Teachers Association, tutor, you know, all related bodies that have some connection to the education and the growth of children should come together with religious organizations, because I think religious organizations have a standard. Regardless of what religion it is, there's a standard, right? It's right and wrong is wrong. And I think we need to determine what we allow, because look, sometimes in schools for carnival, long ago when I was growing up, and there was something called smut, and then there was not. But Smuts could not be played on the radio. Smuts was something that, that you would hear in a party.
All right, so you're advocating a kind of, a sort of a national reconvention on parenting?
Not just parenting,
talking about imposing limits on
Yeah,
but you want to impose limits on what enters the home.
I think saying imposing is making it sound as if it's something dictatorial. What I would like to see is we all agree that there are things that we do not allow into our homes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is,
I mean,
everything is easier said than done, but this is
sure,
one
because
thing
we
you could
have
say is easier said
individual,
than done.
each family would have their own individual standards, values, and so on in the home. So to put a broad brush to it, it would be very challenging to so do. And of course, within the family home, if there's anything coming through on the airways or the TV that, as a parent, and you think it's not something you want your children to view, simply take it off. Or, importantly, because we have to recognize we are living, this is a new era, and we have to accept that what would not have been accepted then in our days, in the long days, it's open now, and is about having that communication with your children, helping them to understand the difference in terms of what you may want them to know versus what they will be exposed to. So a conversation is important to help them through that.
All right, there's another call. Good evening.
Okay.
Hi, good night.
Good evening.
I'm calling to ask, as a teacher, we are sometimes at a loss as to what to do. And I was hearing Ms. Chatur say that there are other things that can be done. I would like to know, if possible, some other things that can be done.
Other than beaten.
Because I am sometimes at a very much at a loss in the school while these different situations are going on.
All right.
So, if you can help me, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, so the first thing I think is that the individual has to practice, I think, Andy, self-care. I think we tend to
You're talking about the parent.
I'm talking about the parent or teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
There must be self-care where you know what are your emotional triggers and you know what works. In the classroom, it is very difficult. I've seen a lot of teachers lose control and they begin to shout, and the children feed on this because, they manipulate that situation. We cause Mr. get into that, and Mr. want to come and teach us, and we don't have class anymore. What you can do is begin to do things like the consequences, give rewards for good behavior. And something that is missing, and I refer this to the caller before, the gentleman who said that possibly there needs to be standards. This is a society that is no longer accountable. There is no accountability, parents, teachers, children, for their actions. And I think we need to get back to the table where we look at that and we observe that and we put things in place. I think in this school, and this sounds like a teacher, many teachers are afraid of their students, and it is because at the policy level, at the government level, let's say things like bullying, you have heard students who mash up their teachers' windshield and all of that. We do not have policies in place where children like that, who are very violently aggressive, are removed until they are rehabilitated. Their parents come into the picture, because parents need to be accountable, I think, Andy, for their children's actions, and we do not have those in place.
All right, and we should.
We should.
All right, there's another caller. Good evening. Good evening.
Hello, good night.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Hello, good night.
Yes.
Okay. I'm calling to let you all know that I enjoy this program, right? And I appreciate how you all talk about the youth. I'm a single parent, actually, and I have one child. He is 24, right? And from small growing up, I grew him up, and he is a very, very nice boy right now, right? But the only thing about it is, as how the two ladies were talking about parenting, and all what you said, what do you have to do about parenting, I did that when my child was about 6 years, good? We from a Christian background, we attend to church and we do all sorts of things together. Up till now, I and my son, we have a good relationship, okay? But it has little things within that I've been talking over and over with him, and I feel like he's not getting it to me. And, you know, for instance, like, he is going to one of the UE campus, right? He's doing his degree, and I feel I just have to talk a little too much now. You know, like, he's coming in a little bit too late for me. When school finishes 9 o'clock, like, well, okay, he's working during the day.
All right, so what you mean? You've lost control of him. You've lost control of him in a way that makes you uncomfortable.
What's that?
You've lost control of him in a way that makes you uncomfortable.
I didn't hear you properly, sorry.
All right. I'm saying you lost control of him in a way that makes you uncomfortable.
Yes.
All right, let's see if we can get one of these ladies here to address what your
I think parents
anxiety
need
is.
to understand that children change. No matter we have all of these rules and all of that. They are in a society where rebellion, especially, is the order of the day sometimes. But, you know, Andy, I know that lots of these children, because the lady said since her child was 6, he grew up in this particular type of environment with rules. And so now he is going against the grain. And in that kind of situation, you reinforce. You don't let go. You reinforce in a manner that says, this is what you learned here. I know that there are challenges, but this is what Mommy taught you. This is what we learned in our home. And I used it with my own kids, because kids, when they're faced with certain things, they sometimes feel, I'm a nerd. I'm not doing what everybody out there is doing, and they feel constrained, and they feel that they have to challenge the system and challenge what they learned at home.
How do you keep a firm hand while not being...
Communication.
Yes,
communication. You got to keep those
yes, I think one of the things, you know, listen to our discussion, listen to calling and so on. One thing we have to recognize is there's no perfect child.
Yes.
There's no perfect parent. We're going to make errors as parents. You're going to see the child. I mean, it's a child, so they will have that, you know, some behaviors that a parent may not really necessarily like. So, but we can't just think in terms of wanting to mold the child in some sort of rigid way that this child will always be some way that is pleasing to us at all times.
And there's no perfect form of parenting.
No, it's not.
Talked about four methods, so all of us as parents fall into one of those.
Correct,
four methods,
and I think sometimes parents are too hard on themselves. So what if it didn't work today? There's always tomorrow, and there's always tomorrow to do a better job at it and to try a different strategy. You know, and I think sometimes we're so hard on ourselves that we feel guilty. We're the worst parents, you know. We moan and groan about it, but there's always tomorrow to do it better. But you must be reflective and think about, what did I do to cause that kind of dissension with my child? What can I do better?
So we always have to be
always reflective.
Yes. I wanted to bring back the teacher who had spoken. And, you know, something we always remind parents in workshops, that the child is sent to school and the parent believes it's up to the teacher to do it all. Then I turn and ask parents, I say, just think, your child goes to school, the teacher comes in the classroom, and unfortunately there are 30 and plus. And the teacher, let's say it's a secondary school where you have 40 to 45 minutes per subject. The teacher walks into the classroom, Johnny, sit down. Mary, stop pelting here. Why don't you? So over 20 minutes, half of it is taken up trying to get some semblance of order into the classroom. So where are the parents that before that same conversation, you are going to school, you are going to sit in your classroom to be able to pay attention and do what is necessary. You have your break time, you have your lunch time, you have after. That is when you have your necessary fun and so on. So it's the teacher's burden to have to try and face all of this.
Another caller. Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes?
Yes, how are you? Everything is all right. I just wanted to talk to Ms. Shatu for 1 minute.
Well, go ahead.
Yes, Ms. Shatu, this is Sean. I used to come by your quarters there by UE. I was one of your students.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember me. I used to come on Saturdays to visit, sometimes to talk about issues concerning myself. I used to wear like gold and stuff like that, and my gold bracelet and gold chain, and we used to talk and stuff like that. But, Ms. Shatu, I just wanted to say, sometimes in life, people wouldn't accept change as readily as other people would, right? So you have to really get into the minds of these individuals, and I'm just talking about criminals, but young adolescents. Because I have a son, he's 13 years old right now, and he's going to a kind of school. They always have to be nurture him, talking to him, always have to figure out what is on his mind and stuff like that. So I appreciate all the work you're doing, but sometimes you need to formulate these young people's minds, because sometimes their minds are not perceptible to change.
All right,
so
thank you very much.
They need to really, you know,
Thank you very much. So what you're saying is that sometimes the task is more formidable than other times in different situations.
Of course, yes. And we alluded to that, but I think he's talking a little bit to programming the child.
Yes.
You know, we want our children to be so perfect.
That's right, which can't
and all
happen.
of that.
And included back to the school, PTA meetings, parent-teachers meetings, and you have a school of 500 students or pupils, and 25 parents attend a meeting. And this is where you see, you go back to like this, the dimension of being uninvolved and so on in your, what your children, what is happening, how you could go in terms of going into these meetings, bringing up issues, discussing it, talking about it. Teachers sometimes send notes to parents. I need to see you because the child would have done whatever it is, which would be something against the rule, and they never return, they never come.
We have a couple of minutes left, but I want us to look at the question of, so all these examples of probably not the most commendable forms of parenting, but they don't necessarily go the way of encouraging children to be violent or to respond violently to what is around them. But there are some instances where we see that.
Yes.
You know, parents wanting to go in school and deal with a teacher, they want to go and deal with somebody who they think may have injured or said something to their child, and that creates, that takes a life of its own.
Yes.
Sure.
And it's become part of the culture now.
Sure, and I think what's important is that when we look in terms of where there's violence in the home, and not only physical, the verbal aspect of it and the other aspect, is that the child is vicariously experiencing violence. And sometimes, yes, whatever they see at the home, whether it's the mother, whether it's the dad, that is doing it to each other, they actually go to the schools and they vent out in their own way because of what they see. So that is where that aspect of the home life impacting on the child. So when the child goes into any other environment, even on the playfield.
What happens in cases where you have a parent saying, well, I don't know where he got that from, I don't know where she got that from, that is not how we live.
But just to go before, on your point, Andy, when you talk about parents going into schools, and so I think it really goes back to the policies that we have in place in our schools. Parents are not held accountable for that kind of aggressive behavior. And even the children are not held accountable. They get suspended for 2-3 days and they come back in. We need in the society, because again, corporal punishment is not seen as a violent means at all, and parents continue to use it. They tend to maltreat their children. We need accountability, we need legislation, we need policies, and I firmly believe that our Ministry of Education needs to begin seriously looking at that, because you see the factors down the road of what's happening, bullying, and you know, you address it in Parliament and you talk about it and you said we'll do this and nothing is done. And 10 years go and they come back to the table to address the same issue that was addressed 10 years before. And I feel teachers are being frustrated because they know, and there are some good teachers out there who are trying their really best to help children in the schools and all of that, but they fear for their safety and their own lives and all of that. We need to come back to the table where children, where parenting is concerned. If we offered a degree in parenting, don't you think that may change things? People out there have degrees in so many things, but they never learn how to parent, and they never have that formal training of skills. And so, as that teacher said, to do it differently. They need to know how to do it differently within the safety of their home.
I've been trying to find a way to ask that question.
Yes.
If we at a stage now where there are too many of us who have children who shouldn't have.
That is an important point. Yes.
Too many of us who are parents who shouldn't be.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. The idea of being a parent but not knowing how to parent, it's very challenging.
Is that something we
there.
can address?
But that has
as a
always been
society?
kind of like that, you know, actually, you know, children
I think
having
because, yeah.
children and all of that.
Yes, yeah,
but
yeah.
again, in those kinds of environments, you had support networks
Yes.
where you had the auntie and extended
family.
families helping out that we don't have now.
Yes.
And so that parents show their, you know, leave their children 8, 9 years at home while they go to party and while they do other things. And they turn a blind eye to the real concerns.
Yes,
you
and
know?
added to that, as you said, going to parties and so on, now you have a lot of grandparents having to look after their children, their
Yes,
grand.
yes.
You know,
and
that
that
in
used to
itself.
be okay generations
Then.
ago, but it appears not to be
Yeah.
okay
because
now.
even when a grandparent, you'd have other extended families around helping out through, but now you have a grandparent actually having to do it all because mother or father is nowhere around.
And we've come to accept when people say that part of the problem too is what the phenomenon that developed in the last couple of decades, although it was something that was going on,
All the
probably not
time.
to the same
The
extent.
level.
What is called barrel children,
Oh, yes.
one
Yes.
or both parents
Again,
gone
yes.
away to look for a better living, and
Yes.
the child is left to be raised by a grandparent or
Right,
a relative,
yes, yeah.
and that turns into disaster.
Yes.
Of course, because people don't know the trauma associated with that, you know. We
Sure.
did a study like that a few years
Yeah,
ago.
that's what I'm saying, the materialism has taken over. So that social and emotional connection with children, with the parent, is no longer there.
But not only
ever so often.
Yeah, but the trauma associated with that, where children are always expecting to go away to live. Mommy,
Yes,
mommy gonna
that's
send
the
for me, so I
promise.
don't have to do anything in school here. I don't have to apply. I could be as rebellious as I want because I am going abroad. You know, so there's a lot, and then when abroad doesn't happen now, what is the cause for
And
these
sometimes
poor
it
children?
happens, and then the children, after some years,
They become
are sent back.
latchkey
Yes.
kids
Or sent back
abroad
there because
and
of
get into
problems
a
there.
lot
Sure.
of trouble.
Sure.
There's
So-
a lot of children who get into a lot of trouble
Yes.
abroad.
So
Yeah.
just with just more than a little more than 2 minutes on.
Okay.
Let's come back on this question with breaking those cycles, and
Yes.
it has to revolve around better parenting.
Yes.
And finding alternatives to parent and recognizing, as I said, Andy, what are the triggers and removing yourself from the act and proacting, and not only that, recognizing that you have to recognize what are the emotional triggers that may make you want to hit. Because one of the things that we have not addressed here this evening is child-to-parent violence.
Yes.
And we see an increase
That
in that
is
where
definitely
children are
increasing.
now becoming violent
Yes.
and beating their
Yes,
parents.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's in
And
the
throwing,
papers.
you know,
Yes.
and that is a
Parent hit
dynamic
child
that
hit.
was not really addressed long ago, or not even seen long ago, but
Yes.
now it's becoming, I think, more prevalent
Yeah, there
in
was a story
society.
in the paper last week in which a guy was killed, and,
And
his
the
mother
mother-
said that she had been put out. He put her out of the house.
Yes.
She was out of the
Yes.
house for a
Yes.
year
Yes.
because she
yeah.
couldn't control him. He was taking
Sure.
advantage of. He was beating her.
Yes. Yeah.
And where do parents go to address that? Do our social services offer, you know, kind of guidance there or intervention? We need to look at the resources that we have to help persons in those kinds of situations, parents who can't do it.
Yeah. But I want to get back to you on the point about the Ministry of Education. You say that, from what you say, I'm picking up that you think that there should be a more forceful position on this question about licks in the home.
Not on licks, but on having legislation or policies in place where teachers could feel safe, where the school is a safe place, where students coming there could feel safe against bullies because they know things are in place. They know that things are in place if this person, and they don't have to hide it, where conversations happen within the schools, where teachers address certain things, where principals and administration address things, because it's become so much that academics and qualifications are the order of the day. It's a rush job, SPAs, everything, and they don't look at the emotional, the EQ, the emotional intelligence of these students, building resilience. And I think it's far too long gone. We need to address those issues.
You have about 15 seconds to make a final comment.
No, well, added to what she's saying, I think sometimes we talk about